Hi, I'm Charlotte from Birth Essence, and welcome to the Find Your Confidence Birth Summit. And today we're welcoming Maddie McMahon, who is a doula and a author and a doula mentor and trainer and a breastfeeding counsellor and many hats in the birthing world. So welcome, Maddie, today. Really grateful.
Oh, nice to be here.
Yeah, it's wonderful. So tell me a little bit about your backstory. How did you become passionate about birth and supporting women in this way?
That's a many-pronged question. I think, like for most people who come into the birth world as lay practitioners, there were many kind of layers to the story, and it was partly my transition to motherhood and how that went for me over well, 3 children really, because I'm a stepmother first, and then I had my 2 babies, and I had very differing levels of support through those births and postnatal periods. With the first baby, with the support of my mother-in-law, who had trained as a La Leche League leader in the States in the 60s, and a Lamaze teacher, which is an American form of birth preparation. She never told me that is what she had done. She just very quietly got on with being there for me, and being my postnatal doula. And I just took it for granted. I was 30 and completely ignorant, and just absolutely just took it. And then between my 2 kids, she died. And I had my second baby. I mean, you know, my bloke, he's great. He's lovely. And he was an experienced parent before I met him. So on one level, I have nothing to complain about, but I definitely felt the lack of this quiet, unassuming woman in my corner who believed in me, who just unconditionally supported the way that I was parenting, and who constantly affirmed that I was doing a good job. In many, many little subtle ways, she made me feel confident in what I was doing and how I was raising my child. So yeah, I definitely felt the lack of her. And then in those conversations that you have as a new mother, you know, preschool playgrounds, I just realized that everybody was lonely. The fundamental, deep-seated loneliness and a shed load of fear. Not just fear about birth, but fear about parenting and whether we're doing the right thing, and that actually the whole responsibility for how these kids turn out is on us. And, you know, and that if you end up with a child who's a drug dealer or a murderer or something, you know, that's on us. So it's like the whole of society's ills, or society working well, is on our shoulders. And I don't think many of us actually bring that into consciousness, but it suddenly it suddenly became very conscious to me that this is what I was seeing in the way that women constantly question themselves, and in a way that it didn't appear that men were. So it slowly began to be a little bit of a feminist issue for me. And that was a revelation, because I'd studied feminism at university, done women's studies modules in my literature degree. And for me, feminism was about important things like glass ceilings and career progression and economic equality, and, you know, big out there in the world things, it hadn't occurred to me that it was about the domestic sphere as well. And as soon as that penny dropped, everything changed for me.
Yeah, I really love to hear that, because it's so true, essentially. But it's really great to speak it out like that, that we've thought of the glass ceiling and the issues outside of the home to be important, which really reveals an inner thinking that's conditioned about motherhood and being in the home and the work and the value of that, which is something that I feel is beginning to change. People are starting to ask for more, and I'm really glad you brought that up, and it's so important. And I think you're right, a lot of people haven't thought about it. I also kind of slipped into things that when I look at them I go, oh, my husband's not feeling like that or thinking like that, and I can't stop what I'm doing. I've got to do these jobs, and he's like looking after himself more. He's like, we can do it tomorrow, and then he's
Yeah,
very
but if we
relaxed.
don't do it now, then tomorrow's going to go tits up. So
Yeah, that's what I worry, and he's like, you've done enough today. It'll be worse if you're ill. And he's kind of right, because often, I mean, there's obvious like things that really have to be done, like feeding and so on with the kids, but the absolute immaculateness of the house or something, and I was like, oh, but it's a mess. And I felt the pressure, and he didn't, essentially. He didn't feel the pressure. So it's a really important point. And were the challenges you had to overcome to feel confident about giving birth at all while you were pregnant? Or I know it's wonderful to hear the support you had the first time around, which, like you said, you kind of took it for granted. I wish it was like that for everyone, that we all had that support and that was just normal.
yeah,
And it's wonderful to hear that you were supported that way.
I think when it comes to birth and fear of birth, I think that I absolutely was one of the lucky ones, and I'm a very good example of how birth isn't something that happens in isolation in your life. Birth is the culmination of hundreds of threads that start when you're a child. So the way that we feel about giving birth as adults have their roots in how we were mothered. And so I know that I was one of the lucky ones, because throughout my childhood, the message I got was that birth was easy, that it was quick and simple and nothing to make a big deal about. Turns out that my first birth was not at all the way my mother told me it was going to be. But actually, that's irrelevant. The fact that she had sort of, quick, easy, straightforward births, and my first labour and birth was a long, hard slog, is kind of irrelevant, because actually it just never entered my head that I might need help. I just assumed that I needed to just carry on what I was doing, and the baby would come out.
Oh, wonderful.
And that's what happened. So I had a solid foundation. I didn't have a fear. I didn't have a fear that birth could break me, that it was bigger than me. I think I've understood deep in the heart of me that it was me. So just like anything else that you just have to kind of slog through, you just get on with it. So yeah, that gave me a huge advantage, I think. And I think the other advantage is my generation, that we weren't being inundated with social media. And whilst that can be a wonderful thing, I mean, look, we've met each other. That wouldn't have happened when I was in. I also wasn't being inundated with fearful stories, so I wasn't having the fear dropped onto me day by day. And you know, yes, that happened in real life. You know, my first example, my first introduction to people talking, mothers talking to each other about birth, was a woman who clutched me on the arm, stared me right in the eyes, and said, "Get an epidural." um, so you know, that was a bit kind of, I was a bit taken aback by that, being only 12 weeks pregnant and only just telling people. But actually, that it was rare, because I wasn't every day coming into contact with, on the internet, with fearful stories of birth and parenting. And I was lucky to have a bloke who'd been through early parenthood himself already, and so just trusted that it'd be fine. You get to the other side of it and begin to step into your power as a parent and feel more confident. And I could see what a lovely relationship he had with his son, and I had already forged a stepmother relationship with him, so I'd already in a way stepped into my own power as a parent. So that gave me, yeah, I suppose, huge unconscious confidence in the process. I think in terms of challenges, it was a lack of preparation, because we need more than just confidence. We need actual information. And when I look back on my first birth now, I know that I was lucky. I had a straightforward birth because I was lucky. And I have proof of that because I have, over the years now, been with many, many women in exactly the same physical situation I was in, who end up with caesarean sections. They have caesarean births in those situations because of failure to wait, failure to believe that she can do it, failure to provide loving, consistent continuity of midwifery care with midwives who have compassion and empathy and who can provide a safe, warm, private environment, and who believe in you, and who are there in your corner cheerleading you until the baby comes out. And when that's not there, the babies come out in another way. So I did luck out. I had amazing midwifery support in my labour. But then that support was withdrawn in the postnatal stay. My first child was late preterm, so feeding got off to a slow start. And any empathy, any skilled support, any understanding of what a mother and a baby, that dyad, needs to come together and learn how to feed and care, that was non-existent. So I had an extremely traumatic 12-day stay on the postnatal ward that left me bereft of any confidence, utterly psychologically broken. And it took me a long time to put myself back together again. So yeah, I think there's lots in my story that show what women need and what happens to them when they don't get it.
How did you support yourself to get back together after you were damaged in the postnatal period? What helped you, with hindsight? What helped you the most?
I don't think I'm a very good example of what we should do to support ourselves, because I am definitely example of somebody who was brought up to have a stiff upper lip. So that's not particularly psychologically healthy. I understand that.
Yeah.
But head down, power on.
I guess it helped you at the time. What would you say to your younger self from like the vantage point of now? If she was going through it again, what would you do differently?
Take the time to reflect, and to heal from that, and to tell the story to somebody who has big open ears and an enormous open heart to hear that story and to help you make sense of it. If I hadn't become a doula, I never would have made sense of it at all. And I think my life and my parenting would have been very, very different. By the time I became a doula, I'd had a fairly healing second birth and postnatal experience. You know, really, really quick, easy birth, and a slide through into an okay postnatal period. But by that time, I was caring for an aged father-in-law who was living with us, and a teenager and a toddler, and trying to run a business. So the wheels came off. I fell apart. So if I'd taken the time 3 years before that to psychologically heal from what I'd been through, I don't think I would have fallen apart quite so spectacularly with my second baby.
Yeah, it makes a big difference, doesn't it?
Yeah, so I think
Psychologically well.
saving grace. It saved me because it enabled me to learn about birth, to learn about what women need when they become mothers, and to give myself some of that nurturing that I was learning to give to other people. To be a bit kind on myself and not blame myself for what had happened.
It seems like a very common situation that we, particularly as we step into the mother role, we're nurturing, giving and caring, but kind of forgetting to do the same for ourselves to the same level, whether it's given by us or we get someone else to give us that support. So it's no wonder the wheels come off, as you put it, in many women. And sometimes we don't know they've come off because we keep quiet about it in our isolation, like you mentioned right at the beginning, as a big feminist issue and loneliness issue. So I'm really glad you've shared that some women are listening to just, I think we don't see it until it's too late and the wheels have come off. Like you said, we keep going. It's a very British thing as well, and we keep going. I think maybe all women there's some listeners from other countries, but we keep going. And it's only when the wheels come off, and then other people may put it into perspective and go, you were doing this and this and this, and we hadn't even realised, like when you give me the list of all those people you were looking after and all those things you do. I mean, having just one toddler to look after can be, and with a new baby can be a lot. And then all these other people, it's no wonder. And we sort of kind of shoulder that as if it's okay and normal because it's so common. Actually, way too much for one person. So yeah, thank you for that. And what other ways do you see, now that you're a doula and you are supporting lots of women, what ways do you see that women struggle to get the confident, easy births that they deserve?
It's such an interesting psychological mix of, as I said earlier, about all the threads that you're bringing from your whole life, and the understanding, the ideas, the assumptions that you've grown up with around birth and parenting, how you were parented, and how all of that, the deep-seated young child memories are triggered when we become parents ourselves. And then, there's society and the media and those messages that birth is painful, and that parenting is fundamentally about puppy training, that you have to be a sergeant major and a disciplinarian and have strong boundaries and sit your children on naughty steps. We get all of these messages from society that that's what parenting is. And if we don't do that, we're bad parents. And then we step into a maternity system, which in the UK, to not mince my words, is not fit for purpose. Being pregnant is not an illness, and it is not something that needs fixing. It needs something that needs to be lovingly nurtured, because it's growth. So if we want a flower to blossom, if we want the vegetables to grow and be tasty and juicy in our allotment, we can't just blindly follow steps. We have to nurture, we have to adapt to individual circumstances, we have to care for those things. And I think that's what's so often sadly lacking. We call it maternity care, but what I don't see is the care, the time and the ability to look at somebody and say, how are you really? What's worrying you? What's your instinct telling you about this baby? How are things at home? What plans are you making for after the baby's born? Who's going to look after you? When's the last time you heard a woman tell you that a midwife had asked them those questions, unless they were lucky enough to have an independent midwife?
I was going to say that.
Working with, you know, some
He's got the
sort of
time.
midwifery cohort, you know, model. It sadly, you know, that it's just not happening at all. And I absolutely hate it when people come to me and say, well, you know, we started thinking about a doula because we go to see the midwife and it's 5 minutes. She takes my blood pressure and dips my wee and sends me on my way and asks me how I am as she's holding the door open for me to leave. That's not care. But I don't want to fill that gap. That's not what doulas should be doing. We're not there as an instead of, we're a complementary service. We should be complementing true holistic midwifery care. And so it makes me very worried that people are turning to doulas to fill that gap. So yeah, I think we're in a situation where maternity care needs a huge overhaul. And I stay in this world because I see the midwives who get it and who are working hard. They're fighting to improve things and to change the system so that women and their partners, their families are properly nurtured through the experience, and that midwives don't burn out and leave the service because they can't tend their allotments the way that they train to do.
No,
That's it.
Given that starting point with the, you know, and it's very clear it's the system itself that's broken, and there's people in it trying to make changes, people outside trying to make changes, and the women themselves. And the system's still broken at the moment. Given that starting point, what would you suggest a woman do to help herself get the best birth she can currently?
Gather her clan. So you need women around you that believe in you. That's how we've played this since the dawn of time. Women working together, supporting each other. Older women who've been through it with the wisdom, passing on those tips and tricks to the younger women who are going through it for the first time. But even more vital than that really is just, as I said, my mother-in-law, it was the quiet confidence, the companionship. So I talk to the doulas that I train about doulaing being nothing more than walking a path with someone, holding their hand, and that's it. We're not leading them, we're not pushing them, we're just walking alongside, and that's massively powerful. It means that you don't feel alone and lonely. And when you don't feel alone, you feel safe, and the oxytocin can flow, and babies grow well, and labour progresses, and the bond between mother and child can be strong when we are in a high oxytocin environment. So that's one of the things that we absolutely need is those female connections. That could be a doula, but quite equally could be friends and family. But I do think that there's something very beautiful about that female companionship. Not that I don't think that men can't do it, or that anyone, whatever your gender identity, could be a brilliant companion. I'm just saying that traditionally, people who identify as women have come together to support each other through the journey.
I think that might also be partly that traditionally the women who did that were older women who'd had their children, so they could look a woman in the eye and go, I know. And they did know, and that's what it is, not so much the women, it's that shared experience that they know, and they've been there and they're still alive. On some point, your body that's scared in that moment, am I going to be still alive at the end of this, can see, well, she is, she's done it, so and she's saying I'm okay, so she must know. So we kind of relax in that.
Yeah, absolutely. It is that shared experience, that that empathy. You know, there is something very profoundly magical about peer support, whether that's birth support or breastfeeding support. When we can look in that woman's eyes and think, well, she's done this, if she can do it, I can too. Yeah, that has a profoundly magical effect, I think. So definitely that's the first thing that we need. If a woman's coming into birth and she has fear, then that fear needs addressing. And that's something that is slowly starting to happen in the NHS, and understanding that it's not just primary tocophobia that needs to be treated, and actually women who, you know, are actually phobic of birth still are not getting the support that they need. But it's a spectrum. And women are coming in with a lot of fear that wouldn't be diagnosed as tocophobia, who also need support. And there's a slowly growing understanding that we need those forms of support. So if you're a woman who has, you know, when you think about birth, it gives you the cold shudders, then it's really worth unpicking that with somebody, and to try to get to the root of where that's come from. You know, what messages did you grow up getting from your female relatives? What maybe, you know, did you learn at school? Or, you know, I remember having a client once who it all came back to the video that they showed of sex education at school, and it, you know, it just given her the absolute horrors. And she'd forgotten it until we really dug into where all of this was coming from. And I asked her, okay, so what about school? What did you learn about birth at school? That's when suddenly she remembered that film. And so then we could pick apart what she'd seen, those images that were in her memory, and I could give her much more of an understanding of what was happening at the time and why the woman was making those noises, and for her to understand the physiology of what was going on. So I think that's what I mean by women need information. They need to understand what their bodies are going to do, how their bodies work, that their bodies are designed to open up and let a baby out and magically come back together again afterwards. I mean, wow, we're Meccano. It's amazing. And to build that sense of awe in their capabilities and sense of excitement. And once you start layering on those positive emotions, hopefully the negative ones start dissolving. But we need the resources for that, and I so wish that that there were more signposts for women like that, so that they were in the direction of people who could help them. And obviously, if they've got the fear because actually it's based on reality, I've had a shit time. My last birth was utterly traumatic. I've been left with feelings that are hard to live with, if not absolute full-blown PTSD. Then why are we letting them just sleepwalk into a next birth, a birth that actually they don't know whether they can actually do psychologically, that it may break them forever, and wondering whether they can actually go through with this pregnancy even. That's criminal. When there are forms of support out there for them, we know how to deal with birth trauma, and they're not getting it.
I'd like to see that too, and I'd definitely like to see it before it gets to there, and of course if it has happened, to see. And so I'd like all the women listening to know that there is support, and to look for it. People don't always look for it, and it goes under the radar until the next pregnancy, or until it's even then. And like you said, if people aren't trained to deal with that, then that traumatized person can get quite a way through the pregnancy before anyone notices. Because we put a brave face on for the world. And so in your mid appointment, if they're asking how you are as you're leaving, you go, yeah, I'm okay, I'm a bit down. Everyone goes, oh, you'll be all right, it's normal, or whatever. And that bit down is a cover up for I'm actually not coping at all. And you don't know why. It could be anything. It could be birth trauma, it could be anything, but it's a big red flag. And I think even for every woman that has even the tiniest fear or slight niggle, it's worth unpicking it. I have supported a friend in labour who literally had what would be considered a slight niggle, but it was stalling the labour. And when she called me and I said, okay, number one, this labour, you've not actually been in birth as long as you think you have. The other one was faster, but you're actually okay time-wise, but I know you. Tell me what is there something? Just something that's holding you back? And she went, oh, there is something. And it was really small. And she went and spoke to her partner, and it just, boom. Yeah. And so because of that, like, our brain doesn't really kind of differentiate as much as we think for the body between a big fear and a little fear. Obviously the really big fears we're totally not functioning, but it can still affect the physiology. So I think it's so worth even the slightest fears or worries or concerns to check them out, unpick them, and those smaller ones can be quite easy to unpick, but it's worth doing. And then you're not carrying that pushed back. It takes a lot of energy to push it back and get on with life.
All you need is somebody to show you that they are really interested in how you feel, and that can be enough. I remember I was on a panel at a birth conference once, and I was speaking, and then at the end a woman put her hand up in the audience and said, can I ask a question? And she said, what do you do if you're petrified? And then I just said, well, wait, because when this is all done, I'm going to come and talk to you. And actually all she needed was a cuddle, and for me to say, do you want me to come round your house and we'll have a chat about it? And I ended up being her birth doula and seeing her through an absolutely euphoric labour and birth. But that was she needed to just vomit out all of those fears. And once she did that, you know, I hardly needed to do anything at all.
It's really encouraging to hear, because the solutions are quite simple, right, in many cases. It's humanity, the true caring that you're pointing to.
Absolutely.
It's not something that's hard to you know, you have to train for years to.
No, absolutely.
It's very simple, accessible. It's once you know what to look for and ask for in that way.
It always reminds me that human beings are fundamentally a tribal species. So we live in community. That's how we thrive. We need each other's support. As a herd, you know, we don't work well alone. It's not good for our mental or physical health. So at such a vulnerable time, we need each other. So for me, being a doula is about community, and about an understanding that if we want to change society, then it seems sensible to me that the place you start is at the beginning, with birth. And if women are bathed in oxytocin around that time, they feel loved, they feel supported, then birth is going to go well, and they're going to come out feeling strong and capable, and those feelings are going to slide through into their parenting, and they're going to feel absolutely on it and capable as parents, and they're going to parent in a way that is gentle and empathic, understanding of their children's emotions, and those children are going to grow up as fully functioning, psychologically healthy members of society. It's not rocket science. But when we take oxytocin out of the equation, then what are we left with? People who feel broken and bereft and lonely and unable to understand their own emotions, and laying those negative emotions on everybody else, so that instead of connection, you get disconnect and aggression, and that's how society becomes unhealthy.
You've mostly answered the next question. I was certainly towards it, which was I was going to ask you, what was your vision for the future of birth and how we get there? I think that's part of the answer. But do you have anything to add on that about your vision for the future of birth and motherhood? I'm not sure if you've answered it all already.
Well, I mean, you know, I think it is to go back to what I said right at the beginning, that motherhood is a feminist issue. And I would really love to see women stand up and come together and demand better support, less discrimination, less invisibility. We become so invisible as mothers, don't we?
Yeah.
Suddenly, you know, people look at you in a different way, if they look at you at all. And if they are looking at you, they're judging you. And that's what it feels like for so many women. So, yeah, that's what I would love, is for actually politicians to understand that we're a brilliant resource, and if they just invest in us, actually amazing things could happen. I always think about the charities who give microloans to mothers in developing countries. You know, a few dollars, just $10 maybe. They can buy a loom and make carpets and be able to afford to send their children to school, and those children can get educated and become doctors and contribute to the overall health of that society. $10. It really is not rocket science to think that if we invest in mothers, amazing things can happen.
I love that. Thank you. It's really great. Do you have any final thoughts of what you would like every mother listening to your interview to take away? And take action on?
Can I plug my books?
Yes. I'll be putting links up to your books because I know you've written some great books.
Well, I suppose, you know, as I said, because I'm so passionate about women understanding that we're worthy of to be supported, and we're worthy of being seen as important parts of society, that the work that we do, it has inherent value, then that's why I wrote. And I hope that if you read it, you find it validating. And that at the moments of, you know, when you think, God, can I carry on doing this? This is really hard. That book reminds you how absolutely awesome you are as a mother. It doesn't purport to give any answers. I'm not that kind of writer. I don't think I have the answers for the world. I care about the fact that you're trying to work out your own answers to the big questions of motherhood. But I wrote it because I want people to feel valued.
I believe we do have our answers inside, and it's finding them. We each have our own answers, and sometimes someone else has the answer we need, and in that case we've got the knowledge we need to ask that person. So it's still our own answer. We have the knowledge, oh, I need to answer this question, or here's the answer here, or here's the answer here. And I think it was great. So it's great when people may read that, and the words here have been really helpful today, so clear. And thank you so much for sharing your wisdom. And I hope they've inspired many women to make a difference to their birth and the future of the humanity with the children, and the future going forwards as well. My hope with all these interviews. So thank you for coming on today.
You are very welcome. It's been lovely to connect.
Yeah.